Hi friends, welcome back. Today I'll bring you a new horror stories. But before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As usual, the stories will be told by Mr. X. So, dim your light, pull up your blanket, and let's begin the stories.
I'm writing this late at night because I still cannot sleep when I think about it. I have told this story to a few friends, and every time I do, they tell me it sounds unreal. I understand why they say that. If I had not lived through it myself, I probably would not believe it either. But this really happened to me, and ever since then, trains have never felt the same. This happened about a year ago. I had to travel alone for work, and the cheapest option was a night train. I did not mind. I had taken night trains many times before. They were usually quiet and calm, and I liked watching the dark scenery outside the window. It helped me relax. I arrived at the station a little before midnight. The place was open, but it felt tired, like it was waiting to close its eyes. A few people were sitting on benches, some standing with their bags. Everyone looked quiet and distant, keeping to themselves. The lights above us were bright, but they did not feel warm. When my train arrived, I noticed it looked older than the others. The paint was dull, and the windows reflected the station lights in a strange way. Still, it was a normal passenger train, and no one else seemed concerned. I boarded and found my seat near the middle of one of the carriages. Inside, the air felt cool and still. Most of the seats were taken, but no one was talking. Some people were already asleep. Others stared at their phones or out the window. I put my bag under my seat and sat down, telling myself it would be an easy trip. The train started moving smoothly, and the station slowly disappeared behind us. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. That was normal for this route, so I did not think much of it. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. After a while, I opened them again because something felt wrong. At first, I could not explain it. Everything looked normal. The train was moving, the lights were on, people were sitting quietly, but there was a strange heaviness in the air, like the silence was too perfect. I looked around, then noticed that no one had moved since I sat down. No one changed position. No one adjusted their bags. I looked at the man sitting across from me. He was awake, staring forward, not blinking. His face showed no emotion at all. I tried not to stare and looked away, telling myself I was just tired. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. It was hard to tell. Then I realized something else. The train had not stopped. This route always had several stops, even at night. Small stations, short stops, but stops nonetheless. The train kept moving at the same speed. I looked toward the digital sign that usually showed the next station. It was on, but completely blank. That was when the uneasy feeling turned into fear. I glanced down the carriage and noticed the door between carriages was open. I could see into the next one, and it looked empty. No passengers, no bags, just rows of seats under dim lights. I stood, up slowly, feeling every eye in the carriage turn toward me, even though I did not hear any movement. My heart started beating faster as I stepped into the aisle. I had no idea yet how wrong this trip was about to become. I stood there in the aisle for a few seconds, unsure of what to do next. I did not want to panic and draw attention to myself, but it felt impossible to ignore how uncomfortable I was. I decided to walk toward the next carriage, telling myself that moving might help clear my head. As I stepped closer to the open doorway, I noticed the air felt colder near it. The lights in the next carriage were dimmer, giving everything a gray look. I paused at the doorway and looked back at my seat. The man across from me was still staring forward, his face completely empty, like he was no longer aware of anything around him. I took a deep breath and walked into the next carriage. It was completely empty. Every seat was clean and untouched. There were no bags, no jackets, no signs that anyone had ever sat there. The windows showed the same endless darkness outside. I walked a few steps forward, then turned around. The carriage I had just left was now empty too. My heart began to race. I stood there, frozen, trying to understand what I was seeing. Just seconds ago, it had been full of people. Now it looked exactly like this one, silent and unused. I rubbed my eyes, hoping it was some kind of trick, but nothing changed. At the far end of the carriage, I noticed a man standing near the door. He was wearing a dark uniform, like a train conductor. His back was facing me, and he stood perfectly still. Seeing someone in uniform gave me a small sense of relief. At least I was not alone. I walked toward him and spoke quietly, trying to sound calm and polite. "Excuse me," I said. "I think there is a problem. The train has not stopped, and the signs are not working." He did not respond. I tried again, a little louder. He slowly turned around to face me. His face looked pale and tired, like he had not slept in a very long time. His eyes were dark. When he looked at me, it felt like he was looking through me instead of at me. "You should return to your seat," he said. His voice was flat and low, with no emotion in it. "I was just looking for help," I replied. "I think I may be on the wrong train." He shook his head slightly. "This train does not go the way you think," he said. "It only moves forward." Those words made my stomach tighten. "Forward to where?" I asked. He was silent for a moment, and then answered quietly, "That depends on how long you stay awake." I did not know what to say to that. A cold feeling spread through my chest. I took a small step back. "What happens if I fall asleep?" I asked. He did not answer. He simply looked past me toward the empty carriage behind me. "You should sit down," he said again. "It is safer." Before I could ask anything else, the lights in the carriage grew dimmer. The darkness outside the windows seemed to press closer, like it was surrounding the train completely. I turned and walked quickly back toward my seat. When I stepped through the doorway, I stopped in shock. The passengers were back. They were sitting exactly where they had been before, in the same positions, with the same blank expressions. This time, none of them looked at me. They all stared forward. I hurried to my seat and sat down, my hands shaking. I tried to breathe slowly, telling myself not to lose control. One by one, every passenger closed their eyes. At the same time, their heads tilted forward slightly, their bodies relaxed in the same way. It looked unnatural, like they were following an unseen command. I remembered the conductor's words and felt fear tighten in my chest. How long you stay awake? I kept my eyes open, staring at the floor, afraid of what might happen if I let myself sleep. The train continued moving through the darkness. I forced myself to stay still in my seat. My eyes burned from trying to stay open, but I was too scared to close them. Every person around me was sleeping in the exact same position. Their faces looked calm, but something about it felt wrong, like they were not really resting, just waiting. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time on the screen had not changed at all. It was like the phone was stuck, unable to move forward. I put it away and focused on my breathing, slow and steady. just like I had been taught to do when feeling anxious. After some time, I noticed the train began to slow down. It was very subtle at first. If I had not been paying close attention, I might not have noticed it at all. The movement felt heavier, like the train was pushing through something thick. I lifted my head and looked out the window. For the first time since leaving the station, I could see something clearly outside. A platform passed by slowly. It looked old, but real. There were signs, lights, and benches. The lights were weak, but they were warm, not cold like the ones inside the train. I leaned closer to the glass, hoping to read the name of the station, but the letters were worn and hard to recognize. The train did not stop. As we moved through the station, I noticed people standing on the platform. They were lined up neatly, facing the train. No one waved or moved. They just stood there, watching us pass. Their faces were blank, but their eyes looked tired, deeply tired. A sudden fear hit me. I felt certain that if the train stopped there, I would not be allowed to leave. Or worse, I would not want to leave. Once the platform disappeared, the train slowly picked up speed again. The darkness returned, pressing against the windows. I looked back into the carriage. One person was awake. It was a woman sitting a few rows ahead of me. Her eyes were open, and she was looking straight at me. I froze, unsure if I should speak or pretend I had not noticed. She lifted her hand slightly, just enough for me to see. "Do not sleep," she said quietly. Her voice sounded weak, like it had not been used in a long time. I nodded slowly. "How long have you been here?" I asked. She shook her head. "I stopped counting," she said. "Time does not work properly here." "Why are we still on this train?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "Because we missed our chance," she said. "We thought there would be another stop." Before I could ask what she meant, her eyes closed. Her head leaned forward, and she returned to the same sleeping position as the others. It was like she had never woken up at all. My heart raced. I thought about the station we had just passed, about the people standing there, about the conductor's words. There may not be another one. I stood up again, my legs shaking. I did not care anymore if something bad happened. I needed answers. I walked toward the open doorway between carriages, feeling the air grow colder with every step. When I entered the next carriage, I saw the conductor standing there, waiting. "You are still awake," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I want to get off at the next station." He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke softly. "There may not be a next one for you." The train kept moving forward, steady and unstoppable, and I felt like I was running out of time. I stood there facing the conductor, trying to keep my voice steady even though my whole body felt weak. The air around us felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my shoulders. "I want to leave," I said. "I am not supposed to be here." He looked at me with a tired expression, the kind you see on someone who has given the same answer too many times. "Most people say that," he replied, "but this train does not stop for everyone." I swallowed hard. "You said it depends on how long I stay awake," I said. "So if I do not sleep, I can still get off." He did not deny it. That silence felt like the closest thing to hope I had. "There is one last stop," he finally said. "Not everyone sees it, and not everyone reaches it awake." "When?" I asked. "Soon," he said. "Or maybe it has already passed." Before I could ask more, he stepped aside and pointed down the carriage. At the end was a door I had not noticed before. The window was dark, like it did not show the outside at all. "If the train stops," he said quietly, "You must move immediately. Do not hesitate. Do not look back." I nodded, even though my legs felt unsteady. I returned to my seat and sat down. I focused on staying awake. I counted my breaths. I pressed my feet against the floor and clenched my hands when my eyes grew heavy. Time stretched in a strange way. My thoughts felt slow, like they were sinking. Several times, my head leaned forward, and each time I forced myself upright again. It felt like a struggle against something that wanted me to give up. Then the train slowed. This time, there was no doubt. The lights inside grew brighter, warmer. Outside the window, I saw a small platform. It looked normal. Simple sign, old benches, a single lamp casting soft light. The train stopped. The doors opened. I stood up instantly and moved toward the door. As I passed the sleeping passengers, I noticed tears on some of their faces. They were crying in their sleep, silent and unmoving. At the door, I felt a strong urge to turn around, to look back at the train, at the people, at the dark path ahead. I remembered the warning and forced myself forward. I stepped onto the platform. The moment my feet touched the ground, the doors closed behind me. The train began moving again, slowly fading into the darkness. I watched until it disappeared completely. The station was empty and quiet. After a while, I found the exit. Outside, the road looked familiar. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The signal was back. The time jumped forward like nothing strange had happened at all. I went home and did not sleep that night. Even now, I avoid night trains whenever I can. But sometimes, when everything is quiet, I think about that train, about the people still inside, trying to stay awake, and I wonder how many of them are still waiting for a stop that may never come. I am sharing this here because I still think about it almost every night. I have waited a long time to talk about it, mostly because I was afraid people would laugh or say I imagined everything. But the older I get, the more I realize that some experiences do not need proof to be real. They just stay with you. This happened when I was traveling alone for the first time. I had finished visiting a relative in another city and decided to take a night train home. It was cheaper, and I liked the idea of sleeping during the trip. I had taken trains many times before, so I was not nervous at all. I arrived at the station around 11 at night. The place was not empty, but it felt quiet in a strange way. People were there, sitting or standing, but no one was talking. Everyone seemed focused on their own thoughts. The lights were bright, yet the station still felt dark, like the light could not reach certain corners. When the train arrived, I noticed it looked older than I expected. The metal body was faded, and the windows reflected the station lights in a dull way. Still, it was a normal passenger train, and no one else seemed concerned. I showed my ticket and stepped inside. The carriage smelled faintly of old fabric and cold air. Most of the seats were taken. People sat quietly, some with their eyes closed, others staring forward. I found my seat near the window and put my bag under it. I sat down and tried to get comfortable. The train started moving smoothly. I watched the station slide away and disappear into the dark. At first, everything felt normal. The steady movement was calming, and I felt my body begin to relax. After some time, I noticed something small but strange. The train felt too quiet, not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet. I could hear the sound of the train moving, but nothing else. No phones, no whispers, no coughing. I slowly looked around. No one had changed position. The people near me were sitting exactly the same way as before. I looked at the man across from me. He was sitting upright, eyes open, staring straight ahead. He did not blink. I waited, telling myself I was just overthinking, but his eyes stayed open the whole time. I looked away and checked my phone. There was no signal, which was normal. But the time had not changed. I watched the screen for a moment. Still nothing. That was when I realized something else. The train had not stopped. By now, we should have passed at least one small station. I listened carefully, waiting for the sound of slowing down. It never came. I looked toward the sign that usually showed the next station. The screen was on, but completely blank. A tight feeling formed in my chest. I leaned forward and looked down the carriage. The door between carriages was open. I could see into the next one, and it looked empty. No people, no bags, just rows of seats under weak lights. I stood up slowly, my heart beating faster. As soon as I stood, I felt something change, like the air had shifted around me. I had no idea yet that this was only the beginning. I stood there in the aisle for a moment, trying to act normal even though my hands were starting to shake. I did not want to draw attention to myself, but I also felt like staying seated was no longer an option. The feeling in my chest kept growing heavier, like a warning I could not ignore. I took a few slow steps toward the open door between carriages. As I got closer, the air felt colder, almost damp. The lights in the next carriage were dimmer, giving the space a dull gray look. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at my seat. The man across from me was still there, still staring forward. None of the passengers had moved. No one looked at me. It was like I was not even there anymore. I stepped into the next carriage. It was completely empty. Every seat was spotless. No bags, no jackets, nothing left behind. It looked like a display model of a train, not something people actually used. The windows showed only darkness outside, thick and endless. I walked a little farther in and turned around. The carriage I had just come from was empty now too. My heart began to race. I stared in disbelief, trying to understand how that was possible. Just seconds ago, people had been sitting there. Now there was nothing. I felt dizzy and had to grab the back of a seat to steady myself. At the far end of the carriage, someone was standing. It was a man wearing a dark uniform. From a distance, I could tell he was a conductor. He stood with his back to me, facing the closed door at the end of the train. Seeing him gave me a strange sense of relief. At least, I was not alone. I walked toward him slowly and spoke in a polite voice. "Excuse me," I said. "I think something is wrong. The train is not stopping, and the signs are not working." He did not respond. I waited, then spoke again, a little louder. He turned around slowly. His face looked pale and tired, like he had been awake for days. His eyes were dark and empty, and when he looked at me, it felt like he was measuring something inside me. "You should return to your seat," he said. His voice was calm but flat, without any warmth. "I was just trying to find help," I replied. "I think I might be on the wrong train." He shook his head slightly. "This train does not take people where they expect," he said. "It only moves forward." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. "Forward to where?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment before answering. "That depends on how long you stay awake." A cold feeling spread through my body. "What happens if I fall asleep?" I asked. He did not answer that question. Instead, he looked past me, toward the empty carriage behind me. "You should sit down," he said again. "It is safer there." The lights around us grew dimmer, slowly and evenly. The darkness outside the windows seemed to press closer, like it was surrounding the train. I turned and walked quickly back toward the doorway. When I stepped into the next carriage, I froze. The passengers were back. They were sitting exactly where they had been before, in the same positions, with the same empty expressions. None of them looked at me. They all stared straight ahead. I hurried to my seat and sat down, my breath coming fast. I tried to calm myself, but fear had already taken hold. Then, one by one, every passenger closed their eyes. At the same time. Their heads leaned forward slightly, their bodies relaxing in the same way. It did not look like natural sleep. I remembered the conductor's words. How long you stay awake. I kept my eyes open, staring at the floor, afraid of what might happen if I let myself sleep. The train continued moving through the darkness. I sat there, staring at the floor between my feet, trying to keep my breathing slow and quiet. My eyes felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. Every part of my body wanted to relax, to give in and rest. I had never fought sleep so hard in my life. All around me, the passengers stayed perfectly still. Their sleeping faces looked calm, but something about it felt wrong. It was like they were not really resting, just paused. I tried to listen for breathing, for any sign of life, but the steady sound of the train moving drowned everything out. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time had not moved at all. It was like time itself had stopped caring about this place. I put the phone away, afraid that looking at it too much would make me more tired. After what felt like a long time, I noticed the train begin to slow down. It was very subtle at first. The movement felt heavier, like the train was pushing through thick air. My heart started beating faster. I lifted my head and looked out the window. For the first time since we left the station, I could clearly see something outside. We were passing through a station. The platform looked old but real. There were benches, signs, and tall lamps giving off warm yellow light. The light felt comforting compared to the cold glow inside the train. I leaned closer to the window, trying to read the station name, but the letters were worn and unfamiliar. The train did not stop. As we moved slowly through the station, I noticed people standing on the platform. They were lined up neatly, facing the train. No one waved. No one moved. They just watched us pass by in silence. Their faces looked empty, but their eyes were tired, like they had been waiting for a very long time. A deep sense of fear settled in my chest. I had a strong feeling that if the train stopped there, I would not be able to leave. Or worse, I would not want to leave. Once the station faded behind us, the train slowly picked up speed again. Darkness swallowed the windows, and the cold, light inside the carriage felt even harsher. I turned my attention back to the passengers. One person was awake. It was a woman sitting a few rows ahead of me by the window. Her eyes were open, and she was looking straight at me. I froze, unsure if I should speak. She raised her hand slightly, just enough for me to see. "Do not sleep," she whispered. Her voice sounded weak, like she had not spoken in a long time. I nodded slowly. "How long have you been here?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "I stopped counting," she said. "Time does not work right on this train." "Why are we still here?" I asked, her eyes filled with fear. "Because we stayed," she said. "We thought there would be another stop." Before I could ask anything else, her eyes closed. Her head leaned forward, and she returned to the same sleeping position as the others. It was like she had never woken up at all. My heart was racing. I thought about the station we had just passed, about the people standing there, about the conductor and his warning. I stood up again, my legs shaking. I did not care anymore if something bad happened. I needed to know how to get off this train. I walked toward the open doorway between carriages. As soon as I stepped inside the next carriage, I felt the air grow heavier. The lights were dimmer here, and the seats were empty. At the far end, the conductor was standing, waiting for me. "You are still awake?" he said calmly. "Yes," I replied. "I want to get off, at the next station." He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "There may not be a next one," he said. The train continued moving forward, steady and unstoppable, and I felt like my time was running out. I stood there in front of the conductor, trying to stay calm even though my whole body felt weak. My legs trembled, not from cold, but from the effort of staying awake. The air in the carriage felt heavy, like it was pressing against my chest with every breath. "I need to leave," I said. "This is not where I am supposed to be." The conductor looked at me with the same tired expression as before. There was no anger in his face, no surprise either. Just a quiet understanding, like he had heard these words many times. "This train does not belong to schedules," he said. "It belongs to moments. Some people notice too late." I swallowed hard. "You said it depends on how long I stay awake," I said. "So that means I still have a chance." He did not say yes, but he did not say no. "There is one last stop," he finally said. "Not everyone can see it, and not everyone is awake when it comes." "When will it happen?" I asked. He looked away for a moment, as if listening. "Soon," he said softly, "if you are still here." He stepped aside, revealing the end of the carriage. There was a door there that I was sure had not been there before. It looked plain and ordinary, but the window was dark, like it showed nothing at all. "If the train stops," he said, "you must move immediately. Do not hesitate. Do not look back." I nodded and returned to my seat. Sitting down felt dangerous, like I might never stand up again. My eyes burned. My thoughts felt slow and heavy. I counted my breaths. I pressed my feet firmly against the floor. Every second felt like a test. Time lost its meaning. Then the train began to slow. This time it was clear. The movement softened, and the sound of the train changed. The lights inside grew warmer, less harsh. I looked out the window and felt a sudden rush of hope. There was a platform outside. It was small, old, but normal. There were benches, signs with clear letters, and a single lamp casting gentle light. It looked like a place where people actually came and went. The train stopped. The doors opened. I stood up immediately and walked toward the exit. My body felt heavy, but I forced myself forward. As I passed the sleeping passengers, I noticed tears on some of their faces. They were crying in their sleep, silently, without moving. At the door, I felt a strong pull to turn around, to look back at the train, at the dark path ahead, at the people still inside. I remembered the warning and stepped forward instead. The moment my feet touched the platform, the doors closed behind me. The train began moving again, slowly disappearing into the darkness. I watched until the last light faded away. The station was empty and quiet. After a while, I found the exit. Outside, the road looked familiar. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The signal was back. The time jumped forward like nothing strange had happened at all. I went home and did not sleep that night. Even now, I avoid night trains whenever I can. But sometimes, when everything is quiet, I think about that train, about the people still inside, trying to stay awake. and I wonder how many of them are still waiting for a stop that may never come. I am writing this late at night because I still get uneasy when everything around me goes quiet. This is not something I usually talk about, but I feel like if I do not write it down, it will stay stuck in my head forever. What happened to me on that train felt real in a way that is hard to explain. It did not feel like a dream, and it did not feel like my imagination running wild. It felt like something I accidentally stepped into and barely escaped. This happened a few years ago when I had to travel alone for work. I chose a night train because it was cheaper and less crowded. I had taken night trains before, and they were usually calm. People slept, lights were dim, and the journey felt slow and peaceful. I expected the same thing that night. The station was quiet when I arrived. Not empty, but quiet in a tired way. A few people sat on benches with their bags close to them. Some stood near the platform, staring at their phones. No one was talking. The lights above were bright, but they made the place feel cold instead of warm. When my train arrived, I noticed it looked older than the others nearby. The paint was faded, and the windows reflected the lights in a dull way. Still, it looked like a normal passenger train. Nothing about it seemed dangerous or unusual at first. I showed my ticket, stepped inside, and found my seat near the middle of the carriage. The inside smelled like old fabric and cold air. Most seats were taken, but everyone was quiet. Some people had already closed their eyes. Others stared forward, not really looking at anything. I put my bag under my seat, sat down, and leaned back, ready for a long and boring trip. The train started moving smoothly. The station lights slid past the window and disappeared into the darkness. I felt myself relax a little. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. That was normal for this route, so I put it away and looked out the window instead. After some time, I noticed something small, but uncomfortable. The train felt too quiet. I could hear the sound of it moving, but nothing else. No soft conversations, no phone sounds, no movement. I slowly looked around. No one had changed position. It was like time had stopped inside the carriage. I looked at the man sitting across from me. He was awake, staring straight ahead. His eyes were open, but he did not blink. His face showed no emotion at all. I looked away, telling myself I was just tired and overthinking things. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time on the screen had not changed. I waited, watching it for a few seconds, but nothing happened. That was when I realized something else. The train had not stopped. By this point, we should have passed at least one station. I listened carefully, waiting to feel the train slow down. It never did. I looked toward the digital screen that usually showed the next stop. It was turned on, but completely blank. A tight feeling formed in my chest. I leaned forward and looked down the carriage. The door between carriages was open. I could see into the next one, and it looked empty. No passengers, no bags, just rows of seats under weak lights. I stood up slowly, my heart beating faster. As soon as I stood, the air around me felt different, heavier somehow. I did not know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to go wrong. I stayed standing in the aisle for a few seconds, trying to calm myself down. I told myself there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe the train skipped a stop. Maybe the screen was broken. None of that explained the feeling in my chest, but I tried to hold on to logic anyway. I took a few careful steps toward the open door between carriages. The closer I got, the colder the air felt. It was not a sharp cold. just a deep chill that made my skin feel tight. The lights in the next carriage were dimmer, almost gray. Before stepping through, I looked back at the people behind me. No one had moved. They were all sitting exactly as before, faces calm, eyes either open or half closed. None of them looked at me. It felt like I had already faded out of their attention. I stepped into the next carriage. It was completely empty. The seats were clean and untouched. There were no bags, no jackets, nothing to show that anyone had been there before. The windows showed nothing but darkness. Thicker than the darkness outside my own carriage, I walked forward slowly, my footsteps feeling louder than they should have. Halfway down the carriage, I turned around. The carriage I had just left was empty now, too. My heart started racing. I stared at the empty seats, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Just moments ago, people had been sitting there. Now it looked like no one had ever been there at all. I felt lightheaded and had to grab the back of a seat to steady myself. At the far end of the carriage, I noticed someone standing. It was a man in a dark uniform. I recognized him immediately as a conductor. He stood with his back to me, facing the end of the train. Seeing him brought a small sense of relief. At least someone was there who might explain what was happening. I walked toward him slowly and spoke in a polite, quiet voice. "Excuse me," I said. "I think something is wrong. The train is not stopped, and the signs are not working." He did not respond. I waited a moment, then spoke again, a little louder. He turned around slowly. His face looked pale and tired, like he had not slept in a long time. His eyes were dark and deep, and when he looked at me, it felt like he was looking at more than just my face. "You should return to your seat," he said. His voice was calm but flat, without any warmth. "I was just trying to find help," I replied. "I think I may be on the wrong train." He shook his head gently. "This train does not take people where they expect," he said. "It only moves forward." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. "Forward to where?" I asked. He paused before answering. "That depends on how long you stay awake." A cold feeling spread through my body. "What happens if I fall asleep?" I asked. He did not answer that. Instead, he looked past me, toward the empty space behind me. "You should sit down," he said again. "It is safer there." As he spoke, the lights around us slowly grew dimmer. The darkness outside the windows seemed to press closer, like it was surrounding the train. I turned and walked back toward the doorway, my steps faster now. When I crossed into the next carriage, I froze. The passengers were back. They were sitting exactly where they had been before, in the same positions, with the same empty expressions. None of them looked at me. They stared straight ahead, like I was not even there. I hurried back to my seat and sat down, my hands shaking. I tried to breathe slowly, but fear had already taken hold. Then, one by one, every passenger closed their eyes. At the same time, their heads leaned forward slightly, their bodies relaxing together. It did not look like normal sleep. I remembered the conductor's words. "How long you stay awake." I kept my eyes open, staring at the floor, afraid of what might happen if I let myself rest. The train continued moving through the darkness. I sat completely still, afraid that even the smallest movement might draw attention to me. My eyes stayed open, but they burned from the effort. Sleep kept pulling at me, slow and heavy, like a warm blanket I was not allowed to touch. I had never felt so tired and so afraid at the same time. Everyone around me stayed asleep in the exact same position. Their faces looked peaceful, but something about it felt wrong. It did not feel like rest. It felt like waiting. I tried to listen for breathing, hoping to hear something human, something normal. But the sound of the train moving forward drowned everything else. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time still had not changed. It felt like the world outside this train no longer existed. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and focused on staying awake. I pressed my feet flat against the floor and dug my fingers into my palms. After what felt like a long time, I noticed the movement of the train begin to change. It was very slight, but it was there. The train felt heavier, like it was pushing through something thick. My heart started beating faster. I lifted my head and looked out the window. For the first time since we left the station, I could clearly see something outside. We were passing through another station. This one looked older than the others I remembered. The platform was long and worn. The lights were dim but warm, and for a moment, seeing them made me feel hopeful. I leaned closer to the window, trying to read the name on the sign, but the letters were faded and unfamiliar. The train did not stop. As we moved slowly through the station, I noticed people standing on the platform. They were lined up neatly, all facing the train. No one moved. No one waved. They just watched us pass. Their faces were blank, but their eyes looked tired, like they had been waiting for something that never came. A deep sense of fear settled in my chest. I felt certain that if the train stopped there, I would not be allowed to leave. Or worse, I would not want to leave at all. Once the platform disappeared behind us, the train slowly picked up speed again. Darkness returned to the windows, thicker than before. The cold light inside the carriage felt harsh on my eyes. I looked back at the passengers. One person was awake. It was a woman sitting a few rows ahead of me near the window. Her eyes were open, and she was looking directly at me. I froze, unsure of what to do. She raised her hand slightly, just enough for me to notice. "Do not sleep," she whispered. Her voice sounded weak, like she had not spoken in a very long time. I nodded slowly. "How long have you been here?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "I stopped counting," she said. "Time does not work right on this train." "Why are we still here?" I asked. Her face tightened with fear. "Because we stayed," she said. "We thought there would be another stop." Before I could ask anything else, her eyes closed. Her head leaned forward, and she returned to the same sleeping position as the others. It was like she had never woken up at all. My heart was racing. I thought about the station we had just passed, about the people standing there, about the conductor and his warning. I stood up again, my legs shaking. I did not care anymore if I was noticed. I needed to know how to leave. I walked toward the open doorway between carriages. The moment I stepped into the next carriage, the air felt heavier. The lights were dimmer and the seats were empty. At the far end of the carriage, the conductor was standing, waiting for me. "You are still awake," he said calmly. "Yes," I replied. "I want to get off, at the next station." He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "There may not be a next one," he said quietly. The train kept moving forward, steady and unstoppable, and I felt like my time was slipping away. I stood in front of the conductor, forcing myself to stay upright. My body felt weak, like it had been awake for days instead of hours. Every breath felt heavy, and my thoughts moved slowly. But fear kept me standing. "I do not belong here," I said. "I need to leave." The conductor looked at me for a long time. His face did not change, but his eyes looked tired, like he had seen too many people reach this moment. "Most people say that," he replied. "Very few stay awake long enough to mean it. Gao swallowed hard. You said it depends on how long I stay awake, I said. That means I still have a chance. He did not deny it. There is one last stop, he finally said. Not everyone sees it. Not everyone can reach it. When? I asked. He looked past me toward the dark length of the train. Soon, he said, if you are still awake. He stepped aside, revealing the end of the carriage. A door stood there, plain and ordinary. I was sure it had not been there before. The window was dark, like it did not look outside at all. If the train stops, he said quietly, you must move immediately. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. I nodded and returned to my seat. Sitting down felt dangerous, like my body might decide to give up if I relaxed even a little. I kept my eyes open and focused on the floor. I counted my breaths. I pressed my feet firmly against the ground. Time stopped making sense. My head dipped forward more than once, and every time I forced it back up, my vision blurred. It felt like something was pulling at me, gently but constantly, asking me to rest. Then the train slowed. This time, it was clear and undeniable. The movement softened. The sound changed. The lights inside the carriage grew warmer, less harsh. I lifted my head and looked out the window. There was a platform. It was small and old, but normal. There were benches, signs with clear letters, and a single lamp casting soft yellow light. It looked real in a way nothing else had during this trip. The train stopped. The doors opened. I stood up immediately. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself forward. As I walked past the sleeping passengers, I noticed tears on some of their faces. They were crying silently in their sleep, their expressions frozen in sadness. At the door, I felt a powerful urge to turn around, to look back at the train, to look at the people I was leaving behind. I remembered the conductor's warning and stepped forward instead. The moment my feet touched the platform, the doors closed behind me. The train began moving again, slowly disappearing into the darkness. I stood there and watched until the last light was gone. The station was empty. After a while, I found the exit. Outside, the road looked familiar. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The signal was back, and the time jumped forward like nothing strange had happened at all. I went home and did not sleep that night. Even now, I avoid night trains whenever I can. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I think about that train, about the people still inside, trying to stay awake. And I wonder how many of them are still riding forward, waiting for a stop that may never come. I am writing this late at night, sitting alone in my room, because this is usually when the memory comes back. During the day, I can distract myself. At night, when everything is quiet, my mind goes back to that train. I have never told this story in full before, but I swear this really happened to me. A few years ago, I had to travel alone to another city for personal reasons. The cheapest option was a night train. I did not mind at all. I actually liked night trains. They were calm, slow, and usually uneventful. People slept, lights were dim, and the journey felt peaceful. That night, I expected nothing more than a long ride and maybe a little sleep. I arrived at the station around 11:30. It was open, but it felt tired. A few people sat on metal benches with their bags close to them. Some stood quietly, staring into space. No one was talking. The lights above us were bright, but the shadows felt heavier than usual. I remember thinking the station felt colder than it should have. When my train arrived, I noticed it looked old. Not broken, just worn. The paint was faded, and the windows reflected the station lights in a dull way. Still, it was clearly a passenger train. Nothing about it looked dangerous. I showed my ticket, stepped inside, and walked down the carriage. The air inside smelled like cold fabric and dust. Most of the seats were already taken. People sat quietly, some with their eyes closed, others staring forward like they were lost in thought. I found my seat by the window and placed my bag under it. I sat down and took a deep breath, ready for a boring night. The train started moving smoothly. The station lights slid past the window and disappeared into the darkness outside. At first, everything felt normal. I leaned back and looked out the window, watching the dark landscape pass by. After a while, I noticed something fell off. The train was too quiet. I could hear the sound of it moving, but nothing else. No phones, no whispers, no coughing, no shifting in seats. I slowly looked around. No one had changed position. It was like everyone had paused at the same moment. I looked at the man sitting across from me. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead. He did not blink. His face showed no emotion at all. I waited, watching him from the corner of my eye, but nothing changed. I finally looked away, telling myself I was just tired. I checked my phone. No signal. That was normal. But then I noticed the time had not changed. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Still nothing. That was when I realized something else. The train had not stopped. By this point, we should have passed at least one station. I listened carefully, waiting to feel the train slow down. It never did. I looked toward the digital screen that usually showed the next stop. It was turned on, but completely blank. My chest felt tight. I leaned forward and looked down the carriage. The door between carriages was open. I could see into the next one, and it looked empty. No people, no bags, just rows of seats under weak lights. I stood up slowly, my heart beating faster. The moment I stood, the air around me felt heavier, like something had noticed me. And that was when I knew this was not going to be a normal trip. I stayed standing in the aisle, trying to calm myself. I told myself there had to be a normal reason for everything. Maybe the train skipped a stop. Maybe the screen was broken. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Still, that heavy feeling in my chest would not go away. I took a few slow steps toward the open door between carriages. With every step, the air felt colder. Not the kind of cold that bites, but the kind that feels empty. The lights in the next carriage were dimmer, giving everything a dull, gray look. Before stepping through, I glanced back at the people in my carriage. None of them had moved. Their bodies were in the same positions as before, like statues. Some had their eyes open, some closed, but none of them reacted to me standing there. It felt like I had already stopped existing to them. I stepped into the next carriage. It was completely empty. Every seat was clean and untouched. No bags, no jackets, nothing left behind. It did not look abandoned. It looked unused, like no one had ever been there. The windows showed nothing but deep darkness outside. I walked a few steps forward and then turned around. The carriage I had just come from was empty too. My heart started racing. I stared at the rows of empty seats, trying to understand how that was possible. Just moments ago, people had been sitting there. Now it looked like I had imagined all of them. I felt dizzy and grabbed the back of a seat to steady myself. At the far end of the carriage, I noticed someone standing. It was a man in a dark uniform. Even from a distance, I could tell he was a conductor. He was facing away from me, standing very still. Seeing him gave me a small sense of relief. At least there was someone else here. I walked toward him and spoke in a quiet, polite voice. "Excuse me," I said. "I think something is wrong. The train has not stopped, and the signs are not working." He did not answer. I waited a moment and tried again, a little louder. He slowly turned around. His face looked pale and worn, like he had not slept in a long time. His eyes were dark and tired, and when he looked at me, it felt like he was looking past my face, deeper somehow. "You should return to your seat," he said. His voice was calm, but empty of emotion. "I was just trying to get help," I replied. "I think I may be on the wrong train." He shook his head slightly. "This train does not take people where they plan to go," he said. "It only moves forward." Those words made my stomach feel tight. "Forward to where?" I asked. He paused before answering. "That depends on how long you stay awake." A cold feeling spread through my body. "What happens if I fall asleep?" I asked. He did not answer that question. Instead, he looked past me, toward the empty space behind me. "You should sit down," he said again. "It is safer there." As he spoke, the lights in the carriage slowly grew dimmer. The darkness outside the windows felt closer, like it was surrounding the train. I turned and walked back toward the doorway, my steps faster now. When I crossed into the next carriage, I froze. The passengers were back. They were sitting exactly where they had been before, in the same positions, with the same empty expressions. None of them looked at me. They stared straight ahead, like I was not there at all. I rushed back to my seat and sat down, my hands shaking. I tried to breathe slowly, but fear had already settled in. Then, one by one, every passenger closed their eyes. At the same time. Their heads leaned forward slightly, their bodies relaxing together. It did not look like normal sleep. I remembered the conductor's words. "How long you stay awake?" I kept my eyes open, staring at the floor, afraid of what might happen if I let myself rest. The train continued moving through the darkness. I do not know how much time passed after that. Minutes and hours stopped feeling different. The lights above us stayed dim and steady, never changing. The train kept moving forward without slowing down. Outside the window, there was nothing but darkness. No towns, no distant lights, not even shapes of trees. It was like the world outside had ended. I forced myself to stay awake. Every part of my body begged me to rest. My eyes burned. My head felt heavy. Each time my vision blurred, I straightened my back and took a deep breath. I was scared that the moment I closed my eyes, something final would happen. Around me, the other passengers slept in complete silence. None of them shifted or made any sound. Their faces were calm, but there was something deeply sad about them. It felt like they were not dreaming, but drifting away from something they could never return to. At one point, I noticed a woman a few seats ahead of me slowly open her eyes. Hope rushed through me. I leaned forward, wanting to speak to her, but stopped myself. Her eyes did not look normal. They were open, but empty, like she was looking at something far away that I could not see. She slowly turned her head and looked straight at me. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her lips formed words I could not hear. She looked frightened, but also tired, like she had already given up. Then her eyes closed again, and her head lowered back to its resting position. My hands were cold. I held them together tightly, trying to feel something solid and real. I needed answers. I stood up again and walked carefully toward the conductor's carriage. Each step felt harder than the last, my body felt heavier, like the train itself was pressing down on me. The conductor was still there, standing in the same spot facing the window. "I am still awake," I said. "Please tell me what is happening." He turned slowly, his expression unchanged. "This train carries people who are between places," he said. "People who are tired, lost, or running from something." "I am none of those," I said quickly. He looked at me for a long moment. "Everyone thinks that," he replied. I felt frustration rise in my chest. "You said it depends on how long I stay awake," I said. "That means there is a way off." He nodded once. "There is a stop," he said, "but it only appears for those who truly want to leave." "I want to leave," I said without hesitation. "Then you must stay awake," he replied. "And when the train slows, you must move without doubt." I opened my mouth to ask more, but he raised his hand gently. "You should return to your seat," he said. "It will be harder from now on." I went back and sat down. My body felt weaker than before. My eyes felt heavy, and my thoughts moved slowly. The train felt warmer now, almost comfortable, like it was trying to convince me to relax. I felt myself drifting more than once. Every time my eyes closed, even a little, I saw flashes of the station, my home, and people I cared about. It felt like the train was showing me memories to make me stop fighting. Then, for the first time since the journey began, I felt the train slow down. Not much, just enough to notice. My heart started racing. I looked up, afraid to blink. The lights flickered slightly, growing warmer. Some of the sleeping passengers shifted in their seats, their faces tightening as if they sensed something. I remembered the conductor's words, "Move without doubt." I stood up, my legs shaking, and faced the end of the carriage. The train continued to slow. I did not know if this was my only chance. I stood there, holding onto the back of a seat to keep myself steady. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. The train slowed just a little more, enough that I could clearly feel the change. The air inside the carriage felt different now, warmer and almost gentle, like it was trying to calm me. At the far end of the carriage, a door appeared. I know that sounds strange, but I'm sure it had not been there before. It looked simple and ordinary, the kind of door you would see at any small station. A soft light came through the window in it, and for the first time in a long while, that light did not feel wrong. The sleeping passengers began to move. Their faces tightened, and some of them looked uncomfortable, like they were having bad dreams. A few of them slowly opened their eyes, but they did not sit up. They stayed where they were, caught between sleep and waking. I took a step forward. The train slowed even more. With every step I took toward the door, the heaviness in my body grew stronger. My eyelids felt like they were being pulled down. My thoughts blurred, and for a moment, I forgot why I was even walking. Then I remembered the woman who had looked at me earlier. The fear in her eyes stayed clear in my mind. I forced myself to keep going. When I reached the door, I could hear sounds beyond it. Not loud sounds, just normal ones. Distant movement, a soft hum of lights, the kind of background noise you hear at any late-night station. It felt real. It felt safe. The train slowed to a near stop. I opened the door and stepped out. The platform was small, quiet, and almost empty. A single light shone above, casting a warm glow on the concrete. There was a sign with a station name on it, but I did not recognize it. Still, it felt like a real place, not like the darkness I had been traveling through. The moment both of my feet touched the platform, The train began moving again. I turned and saw the doors close. Through the windows, I saw the sleeping passengers one last time. Their faces were calm again, but something about them felt far away, like they were already somewhere else. The conductor stood at the window of the last carriage. He looked at me and gave a small nod. There was no smile, but there was something close to respect in his eyes. Then the train disappeared into the darkness. I stood alone on the platform for a long time, afraid that if I moved, I might wake up and find myself back on the train. Nothing changed. The air felt cold, but normal. The ground felt solid under my feet. Eventually, I found a way out of the station. Outside, the road looked familiar, like I was not far from my city at all. My phone had a signal again, and the time showed only a few hours had passed since I boarded the train. I went home and did not sleep that night. Even now, I avoid night trains whenever I can. But sometimes, when I am awake late and everything is quiet, I think about that journey. I think about the people who fell asleep and never woke up. And I wonder how many of them believed they still had more time. That is why I am sharing this story now. If you ever find yourself on a train that never seems to stop, please stay awake. I want to share something that happened to me a few years ago. I usually don't talk about it, mostly because I still don't fully understand it myself. But since it keeps coming back to my mind, especially late at night, I feel like writing it down might help. This is not a made-up story. This really happened to me, and it started with an ordinary train ride that should have been completely normal. At that time, I was working in another city and going home every weekend. The train was cheaper than driving, and honestly, I liked it. I enjoyed sitting by the window, watching the lights pass by, listening to music, and letting my mind rest. That night, I took the last train because I'd stayed late at work. It was already past 10, and the station felt quieter than usual. The lights at the station were still on, but they felt dim, like they were tired too. Only a few people were waiting. Some were on their phones, some just staring forward with blank expressions. I remember thinking how everyone looked exhausted, like we were all just trying to get home and disappear into our own beds. When the train arrived, it made the usual sound as it slowed down. The doors opened and we got on. Inside, the air felt cold and dry. The train was not empty, but it was far from full. I chose a seat near the middle of the car, not too close to the doors. I put my bag on my lap and checked my phone. No signal, which was normal for that area. As the train started moving, I noticed how quiet it was. No one was talking. No one was laughing. Even the sound of the train moving along the tracks felt softer than usual. I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable, but I told myself I was just tired. Long day, late night, nothing more. A few minutes passed, and the train picked up speed. I looked around casually just to pass time. That was when I noticed a man sitting across from me. I'm sure he wasn't there when I first sat down, or maybe I just didn't pay attention. He looked normal at first, middle-aged, average build, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His hair was messy, like he had been running his fingers through it too much. What stood out was how still he was. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't sleeping. He was just sitting there, facing forward, eyes slightly down, not blinking much. I tried not to stare, but every time I looked away and then looked back, he was in the same position. I told myself to stop being weird about it. People sit like that sometimes. Still, Something about him made my chest feel tight. Not fear exactly, just a quiet sense that something was off. The train stopped at the next station. A few people got off. No one got on. The doors closed again, and we moved forward. I noticed that the car felt even emptier now. I counted the people without meaning to. There were only 5 of us left, including the man across from me. That was when he slowly lifted his head. Our eyes met for just a second, but that second felt longer than it should have. His eyes looked tired, but not in a normal way. They were dark, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at me, calm and quiet, like he had been waiting for me to notice him. I looked away first. My heart started beating faster, and I felt a bit embarrassed with myself. I thought I was overthinking everything. It was late. I was alone, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. I put my earphones in, but I didn't play any music. I just wanted an excuse to avoid looking at him again. I stared out the window instead. Outside, it was almost completely dark. No houses, no streetlights. Just endless darkness broken only by occasional distant lights that disappeared quickly. That's when I realized something strange. The train had been moving for a while now, but we hadn't stopped at the station where we were supposed to. I checked the time. We should have passed it already. I looked up at the digital sign above the door, the one that usually shows the next station. It was blank. No station name, no information, just an empty dark screen. That was the first moment I felt real fear. My stomach tightened, and a cold feeling spread through my arms. I slowly took out one earphone and listened carefully. The train was still moving, steady and smooth, but something felt wrong. Too smooth, too quiet. Then, from across the aisle, I heard the man speak for the first time. In a low, calm voice, he said, "You noticed it too, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't even look at him. My mind was racing, trying to think of a normal explanation. Maybe a system error, maybe a delay, maybe he was just making conversation. But deep down, I knew this ride was no longer normal. I stayed quiet after the man spoke. My hands were cold, and I held my bag a little tighter without realizing it. I kept staring at the window, even though there was nothing outside except darkness. I didn't want to turn my head. I didn't want to give him any sign that I was listening. After a few seconds, he spoke again, still calm, like we were 2 strangers waiting in line at a store. "This train doesn't stop the way it should," he said. "Not this late." That sentence made my heart beat faster. I finally looked at him. He was facing me now, but his body hadn't moved. Only his head had turned. His expression was neutral, almost polite, but his eyes looked heavy, like they were carrying something he didn't want to share. "What do you mean?" I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the train car. The other passengers were still there, but none of them seemed to be paying attention. One woman near the door was staring at the floor. A young guy further down the car had his hood up and was leaning against the window, eyes closed. It was like we were in our own quiet bubble. "I've been on this train before," the man finally said. "Always at night, always when it's almost empty." I forced a small, nervous smile. "Maybe it's just running late," I said. I wanted to believe that. I really did. He shook his head slowly. "Late is different. This is something else." I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. The train kept moving, and the time on my phone kept passing. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. We should have stopped at least twice by now. I stood up and walked toward the door at the end of the car. I wanted to see the map on the wall, the one that shows all the stations. When I looked at it, my chest felt tight. The map was there, but the little light that shows where the train is supposed to be was off. No blinking, no movement. I pressed the help button near the door. Nothing happened, no sound, no voice. I pressed it again, harder this time. Still nothing. "That won't work," the man said from behind me. I turned around quickly. He hadn't stood up. He was still sitting watching me. "Why not?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because no one is driving right now," he replied. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I felt dizzy for a moment. "That's not possible," I said. "This is a normal train." "It was," he said quietly. I went back to my seat, my legs feeling weak. I noticed something else then, something small but deeply unsettling. The sound of the train had changed. It wasn't loud, but it felt distant, like it wasn't coming from around us anymore. Almost like we were moving without effort. I looked at the windows again. The darkness outside looked thicker now, like a wall instead of open space. I couldn't see the tracks. I couldn't see anything at all. "Where is this train going?" I asked. The man took a deep breath before answering. "That depends on how long you stay." My mouth felt dry. "Stay where?" "On this train," he said. "Some people never realize they're not supposed to be here." I looked at the other passengers again. They were still silent, still unmoving. I noticed then that none of them had bags. No phones in their hands, no signs of restlessness. They looked like people waiting for something they already accepted. I stood up again, panic rising in my chest. "I want to get off at the next station," I said. The man's expression softened just a little. "Then you need to be ready when it happens." "When what happens?" I asked. He looked toward the front of the car, his eyes narrowing slightly. "When the train remembers where it is." The lights above us flickered once, just for a second, then returned to normal. But that second was enough to make my heart jump. I sat back down slowly, every sense on edge, waiting for something I couldn't name. After the lights flickered, no one spoke for a while. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I tried to focus on my breathing, slow and steady, the way people say you should when you feel panic coming. It didn't help much. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time was moving forward, but it didn't feel right. Every minute felt longer than the last. I opened my notes app and typed a short message, just in case. I don't even remember what I wrote. Something about being on a train that wouldn't stop. Something about feeling afraid. I never got to send it. The man across from me finally stood up. He moved slowly, carefully, like sudden movements were not allowed here. He came and sat in the empty seat beside me, leaving some space between us. I could feel the cold coming off his jacket. "You're still breathing fast," he said gently. "That's good. It means you're still fully here." I didn't like how he said that. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Some people stop noticing things," he replied. "They get tired. They accept the ride." I swallowed hard. "And what happens to them?" He looked straight ahead. "They stay." The train began to slow down, not suddenly, but gradually, like it was remembering an old habit. The sound changed again, becoming more familiar. My heart jumped with a mix of hope and fear. The lights dimmed slightly, and for a moment, I thought they might go out completely. Instead, they stayed on, but everything looked dull, like the color had been drained from the world. The train finally stopped, The doors did not open right away. I stood up and moved closer to the door, my hands shaking. "Is this a station?" I asked. The man stayed seated. "Not exactly," he said, "but it's close enough." Outside the window, I could see a platform. It looked old and worn. The signs were faded and the lights flickered softly. I didn't recognize the station name. In fact, I couldn't read it at all. The letters looked wrong, like they didn't want to be understood. "Is this safe?" I asked. He paused before answering. "Safer than staying." That was enough for me. The doors opened slowly. Cool air rushed in, smelling like dust and metal. I stepped onto the platform, my legs feeling weak. The ground felt solid under my feet, and that alone gave me some relief. I turned back to thank the man, but he was still sitting there, watching me. "You need to go now," he said. "Don't wait." "What about you?" I asked. A faint, tired smile appeared on his face. "I missed my stop a long time ago." Before I could say anything else, the doors began to close. I stepped back, heart pounding, and watched as the train pulled away. As it disappeared into the darkness, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were no other passengers inside. Every seat was empty. I stood alone on the platform, listening to the quiet hum of the lights. After a few minutes, I heard distant footsteps. A normal train arrived on the opposite track, bright and loud and full of people. When I asked the staff about the station I was standing on, they looked confused. According to them, this stop had been closed for years. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just got on the next train home. But even now, sometimes late at night, I still hear that man's voice in my head. You need to be ready when it happens. I wish I could say that everything went back to normal after that night. But it didn't. I got home safely, yes. But the feeling that followed me never really left. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that exhaustion had played tricks on my mind. I told myself that stress can do strange things to people. That was easier than accepting the idea that the train was something else entirely. For weeks after that, I avoided traveling at night. I took earlier trains, even if it meant leaving work sooner or getting home late. During the day, everything felt normal. The stations were busy, the signs worked properly, and the trains stopped exactly where they should. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, small things started happening. Sometimes, while waiting on the platform, I would notice a digital sign go blank for just a moment before returning to normal. Other times, I would hear an announcement that sounded slightly delayed, like it came from far away. Each time my body reacted before my mind did. My chest would tighten and my hands would feel cold. One evening, about a month later, I was on my way home earlier than usual. The train was crowded, full of noise and conversation. I felt safe. I felt normal again. As the train slowed near my station, I glanced at the window. For just a second, I thought I saw a familiar face reflected in the glass. It was the man. He wasn't sitting beside me. He wasn't even on the train. His reflection appeared behind mine, calm and still, like before. I turned around immediately. There was no one there. When I looked back at the window, the reflection was gone. My heart raced, but the train stopped. The doors opened, and people rushed out. Life continued like nothing had happened. That night, I barely slept. After that, I started paying closer attention to other people on trains. The ones who sat too still. The ones who never checked their phones. The ones who stared ahead like they were waiting for something. I wonder how many of them are still fully here, and how many of them are just riding along. I've thought a lot about what the man said. About missing his stop. About staying too long. I think the train appears for people who are exhausted, people who are not paying attention anymore, people who just want the ride to be over. Now, whenever I take a late train and the car feels too quiet, I get off early, even if it's not my station. I don't wait to see what happens next. I don't try to be brave, because I believe this now, with complete honesty. Some trains are not meant to take you home. Some are just waiting to see if you will notice. I'm writing this late at night because that's usually when the memory comes back. During the day, it feels far away, like something that happened to someone else. But when everything gets quiet, I remember every detail clearly. This isn't a story I plan to tell. It's just something that stayed with me, and I don't think it will ever fully leave. A few years ago, I used to take the train almost every day. Work was far from home, and the train was the easiest option. I knew the schedule by heart. I knew which cars were usually crowded and which ones were quieter. Nothing about it ever felt strange. It was just part of my routine. That night, I left work later than usual. I missed my normal train and had to take one of the last ones running. The station was still open, but it felt different. The shops were closed, the cleaners were already working, and the echo of footsteps sounded louder than it should have. I stood on the platform, scrolling through my phone, waiting. There were only a few other people around. Everyone looked tired. No one was talking. When the train finally arrived, I felt relieved, like I could finally relax. Inside, the car was half empty. The lights were on, but they felt dull, like they hadn't been replaced in a long time. I chose a seat near the window and put my bag on the floor between my feet. As the train started moving, I leaned my head back and closed my eyes for a moment. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but when I opened my eyes, something felt off. The train was too quiet. Normally, you hear conversations, phone sounds, or at least the noise of the tracks clearly. This time, everything felt muted. I looked around slowly. People were sitting in their seats, but no one was moving much. No one was talking. Even the couple sitting together near the door were staring straight ahead, not at each other. I checked my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual, but it added to the feeling that something wasn't right. As we passed through a tunnel, I glanced at the reflection in the window. That's when I noticed a man sitting behind me. I hadn't seen him earlier. He was wearing a simple jacket and dark pants, nothing special. What stood out was his posture. He was sitting very straight, hands resting on his legs, eyes focused forward. I told myself not to overthink it. People sit like that sometimes. The train was supposed to stop at my station in about 10 minutes. I kept checking the digital sign above the door, waiting for it to show the station name. It stayed blank. That's when I felt a small wave of unease roll through me. The train kept going. I kept watching the sign above the door, waiting for any kind of update. Usually, it would show the next station, or at least the travel time. This time, it stayed dark. No words. No numbers. Just an empty screen reflecting the dull lights of the car. I tried not to panic. Trains have system problems, sometimes. That's what I told myself. Still, I couldn't stop checking the time on my phone. We should have slowed down by now. Instead, the ride felt smooth and steady, like we were moving through open space instead of along tracks. I leaned forward and looked down the car. That was when I noticed something else strange. The number of people seemed smaller than before. I was sure more people had boarded with me at the station. Now, only a few were left, spaced far apart. I couldn't remember seeing anyone get off. The man behind me stood up. I felt it more than I heard it. The slight shift of air made my shoulders tense. He walked past my seat and stood near the door, facing it, like he was waiting for it to open. His reflection appeared clearly in the glass. His face looked tired but calm, like he already knew something the rest of us didn't. "You're watching the sign too much," he said without turning around. His voice was quiet but clear, not threatening, almost friendly. "I'm just waiting for my stop," I replied. He nodded slowly. "That's what everyone says." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He turned his head slightly so I could see part of his face. "It means most people don't realize when they've passed it." That made my stomach tighten. "Past what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down the car, then back at the door. "This train runs on memory," he said, "not on schedule." I didn't know how to respond to that. It sounded strange, but not like a joke. Before I could say anything else, the train began to slow down. The change was subtle, but noticeable. The lights flickered once and then settled again. My heart started beating faster. The train stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. No announcement, no doors opening, just silence. Then the doors opened slowly. Outside was a platform I didn't recognize. It looked older than the stations I was used to. The paint was faded, and the lights cast long shadows across the floor. There was no clear station name, only a worn sign with letters that were hard to read. The man stepped closer to the open doors. "This is where some people leave," he said, "if they're paying attention." I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. "Is this my station?" He looked at me fully now. His eyes were serious, but not unkind. "That depends on how long you want to keep riding." I glanced back at the seats. A few passengers were still sitting there, unmoving. None of them reacted to the open doors. It was like they couldn't see them. The air from outside felt cooler, heavier. "Once the doors close," the man added, "they don't open the same way again." I took a step closer to the exit, my heart pounding. I stood there at the edge of the open doors, frozen. Part of me wanted to step out immediately, but another part of me was afraid of what would happen if I did. The platform outside looked real, but also wrong in a way I couldn't explain. The floor was clean but worn, like it hadn't been used much in a long time. The lights were on, yet the place felt empty, almost forgotten. I looked back into the train again. The passengers were still sitting quietly. No one stood up. No one looked toward the door. It was like the open exit didn't exist for them at all. "Why aren't they moving?" I asked, my voice low. The man stayed near the door, not stepping out, not stepping back in. "They don't remember where they were going anymore," he said. "After a while, people forget why they got on in the first place." "That doesn't make sense," I said. But even as I spoke, I felt unsure. My head felt heavy, like I had been awake for too long. He looked at me carefully. "How long do you think you've been on this train?" I checked my phone again. The time was there, but it felt meaningless. I couldn't remember the last station we passed. I couldn't even clearly picture the one where I had boarded. "I don't know," I admitted. He nodded. "That's how it starts." A strange pressure filled my chest, not pain, just a deep discomfort. I suddenly felt very tired. Sitting back down sounded nice. Closing my eyes sounded even better. I noticed the man watching me closely. "Don't sit," he said firmly. "If you sit again, you might not stand up." That snapped me back a little. I took another step toward the open doors. The air outside felt more real than the air inside the train. Cooler, heavier, like it belonged to the real world. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened slightly. "You ride," he said, "and one day you stop asking questions." The thought of that scared me more than the empty platform. I imagined myself sitting quietly, staring ahead, not caring where the train went. Just riding forever. The lights inside the car dimmed slightly. The doors made a soft sound, a warning that they were about to close. "You don't have much time," the man said. "You still remember enough." I took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. As soon as my feet touched the ground, a wave of relief washed over me. My legs felt weak, but real. I turned back to look at the man. He was still standing inside the train. "Aren't you coming?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "I can't. I stayed too long." Before I could say anything else, the doors closed. The train began to move again, slowly disappearing into the dark tunnel. I stood alone on the platform, listening to the fading sound, my heart racing. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned around slowly, my heart still beating hard. The platform was empty except for me. The footsteps I thought I heard were gone, or maybe they had never been real to begin with. The soft lights above buzzed softly, steady and dull, casting long shadows along the walls. I took a few careful steps forward. The station felt abandoned, but not broken. Everything was still in place, just old and unused. Benches sat along the wall, covered in a thin layer of dust. A large clock hung above the platform. It was working, but the time it showed was earlier than it should have been. I checked my phone again. The signal suddenly came back. Messages loaded all at once, as if time had rushed to catch up with me. According to my phone, only a few minutes had passed since I boarded the train. It felt impossible. I walked toward the stairs leading up from the platform. Each step felt heavy, but solid. At the top, I found myself standing outside under a dim streetlight. The road was quiet but normal. A car passed by. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds that made my chest loosen a little. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for the station name I thought I had seen, or at least something close to it. What I found made my stomach drop. The station had been closed for over 20 years after an accident on the tracks. Late-night trains were never supposed to pass through it, let alone stop there. I went to work and tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. Every time I took the train after that, I paid close attention. I watched the signs. I watched the passengers. I made sure I knew exactly where I was. A few weeks later, during another late ride, I noticed something familiar. A man standing near the door of the next car. Same tired eyes, same calm posture. He looked at me for just a moment. Then the train stopped at my station, right on time. I got off without hesitation. I still take the train. I don't have much choice. But I never ride the last one anymore. And when the car gets too quiet, when the signs stay blank for too long, I get off at the next stop, even if it's not mine. Because now I believe this. Some trains do not care where you are going. They only care how long you are willing to stay. I don't usually write things like this, but it's late and I can't sleep again. When the house gets quiet, my mind always goes back to that train ride. I've told myself many times that it was just stress or exhaustion, but deep down, I know that explanation doesn't fully fit. What happened felt too real, too clear to be just my imagination. This happened about 3 years ago. At that time, I was commuting daily for work, using the train almost every evening. It was boring, repetitive, and predictable, which is why I never expected anything strange to happen. Trains, to me, were safe, structured. They ran on schedules and rules. That night, I left work later than usual. The sky was already dark, and the air felt heavy, like rain might come but never did. The station was still open, but most of the shops were closed. A few tired workers were sweeping the floors, and their movements echoed through the space. I remember checking the schedule and realizing I had to take one of the last trains. I didn't like that, but I didn't really have a choice. I stood on the platform with maybe 10 other people. Everyone looked drained. No one was talking. Some stared at their phones. Some just stared ahead like they were running on empty. When the train arrived, it looked normal. Same color, same lights, same familiar sound. I got on without thinking much about it and chose a seat near the middle of the car. I liked sitting there because it felt balanced, not too close to the doors, not too far either. As the train started moving, I leaned back and let out a long breath. My body was tired in that deep way that sleep doesn't fix immediately. I put my bag on my lap and looked around. The car wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. Just quiet. Too quiet. Normally, even late at night, there's some noise, someone talking softly, someone watching videos, someone shifting in their seat. That night, the silence felt thick, like everyone had agreed not to make a sound. I checked my phone. No signal. That was normal in some areas, so I didn't think much of it. I looked up at the digital screen above the door to see the next station. It was blank. I frowned, waiting for it to change. Sometimes it takes a moment, but it stayed blank. No station name, no distance, nothing. The train kept moving. That was when I noticed something else. The man sitting across from me hadn't moved since I got on. He was looking straight ahead, hands resting neatly on his knees, posture perfect. I couldn't remember seeing him bored, but maybe I just missed it. Our eyes met briefly. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. He just nodded slowly, like he recognized me. And for the first time that night, I felt a quiet sense of fear settle in my chest. After that brief moment of eye contact, I looked away. I told myself not to be rude, not to stare at strangers on public transport. Still, I could feel his presence, like he was watching me even when I wasn't looking. The silence in the car made everything feel more intense, like every small movement stood out too much. The train continued forward, steady and smooth. Too smooth, actually. Usually you feel small changes, turns, or slight shaking. This time, it felt like we were floating instead of riding on tracks. I tried to listen closely, but even the usual sounds felt distant. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time was moving forward, but my sense of it felt off. We should have reached the next station by now. I counted the minutes in my head, trying to stay calm. That's when the man across from me spoke. "You take this train often?" he said. His voice was calm and quiet, not aggressive at all. That somehow made it worse. "Yes," I replied after a moment. "Almost every day." He nodded, as if that confirmed something. "Then you know it doesn't usually feel like this." I hesitated. "Like what?" "Like it's forgetting where it is," he answered. I didn't know how to respond. I forced a small laugh, hoping to make the moment feel normal. "Maybe there's a delay," I said. "Or a technical problem?" He looked at the blank screen above the door, then back at me. "Problems have reasons," he said. "This is something else." The train finally began to slow down. Relief washed over me for a second. Maybe we were just late. Maybe everything would go back to normal. But when the train stopped, no announcement played. The doors stayed closed. Outside the window, I could see a platform. It looked dim and old, nothing like the stations I knew. The lights were on, but they felt weak, like they could go out at any moment. I tried to read the station sign, but the letters were faded and unclear. "This isn't my station," I said quietly. "No," the man replied. "It's not many people's station." I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. "Then why did we stop?" He turned his body slightly toward me. "Because you noticed." That answer made my heart beat faster. "Noticed what?" "That the train went too far," he said. "That it kept going when it shouldn't have." The doors finally opened. Cold air moved into the car, carrying a smell like old metal and dust. None of the other passengers reacted. They stayed in their seats, staring ahead, unmoving. "If you want to get off," the man said gently, "you should decide now." I looked at the open doors, then back at the quiet car. "Once they close," he added, "the ride changes." My hands were shaking slightly as I took a step toward the exit. I stood there for a moment, caught between staying and leaving. The platform outside looked real enough, but something about it made me uneasy. It felt like a place that had been forgotten, not abandoned in a dramatic way, just slowly left behind as time moved on. I looked back at the other passengers. They were still sitting quietly, faces blank, eyes unfocused. I noticed then that none of them were checking the time. None of them seemed impatient or confused. It was like they had accepted that this was where they belonged. "Why aren't they getting off?" I asked. The man watched them for a moment before answering. "Because they stopped thinking about where they were going," he said. "After a while, the ride becomes the only thing that feels familiar." That made my chest feel tight. I tried to remember clearly where I was headed. I knew the name of my station, but it felt distant, like a word I hadn't used in a long time. The man stepped a little closer to the door, but didn't leave the train. "You still remember," he said. "That's why you can see this place." "See what?" I asked. "A chance to leave?" The lights inside the car dimmed slightly. Not enough to be dark, just enough to make everything feel dull and flat. I felt suddenly tired. Sitting down sounded comforting. Closing my eyes sounded even better. The man noticed the change in my posture. "Don't sit," he said firmly. "If you sit again, you might not stand up." That sentence shook me. I took a deep breath and focused on the feeling of the floor beneath my feet. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the platform outside. "You keep riding," he said finally. "And one day, you forget that you ever wanted to get off." The doors made a quiet warning sound. "You don't have much time," he said. "The train is deciding." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. The air outside felt colder, heavier, but also clearer. As soon as I stepped onto the platform, I felt more awake, like a fog had lifted from my head. I turned back to the man. "Aren't you coming with me?" He shook his head slowly. I missed my chance. Before I could say anything else, the doors closed and the train began to move away, disappearing into the dark tunnel. I stood alone on the platform, breathing hard, listening to the fading sound. Then I realized something that made my stomach sink. The platform lights behind me were turning off, one by one. As the lights behind me went out, the platform grew quieter, but not completely dark. A few lights near the stairs stayed on, just enough to show me a way forward. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I walked toward them, my steps slow but steady, trying not to panic. The stairs felt endless, but when I reached the top, I found myself outside. A narrow street stretched out in front of me, empty but familiar. The air felt normal again. I checked my phone and almost laughed from relief when I saw the signal return. Messages loaded all at once, and the time made sense again. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for the station I thought I had seen. It took a while, but I found something. The station had been closed years ago after an accident. Late trains were never supposed to stop there. According to old reports, some passengers had claimed the train didn't stop when it should have that night. After that, I paid closer attention during every ride. I watched the signs. I watched the people. I made sure I always knew where I was. Sometimes, on very late trains, I still notice things. A screen that stays blank too long. A car that feels too quiet. People sitting very still, staring ahead like they're waiting for something they can't name. I always get off early when that happens. I don't wait for anyone to warn me. Because now I believe this. Some trains don't run on schedules. They run on how much you remember where you're supposed to be.